Welcome to your review lecture on run-on sentences. I'm going to walk you through this paragraph here so you can see how you can label and fix run-on sentences within a paragraph. One of your assignments for tonight is going to be to go into your grammar packet and work on one of the activities that involves a paragraph which has run-on sentences in it. And I wanted you to have a little extra feedback on how to do that through this activity. So you can see up here on the screen I have a paragraph which has some sentences that have problems. We're going to look at each sentence and decide what parts we have in each sentence. So do we have independent clauses or dependent clauses? And then decide if we need to fix the sentence based on whether it has a dependent clause or an independent clause in it. Okay, if you look at the first sentence, my worst experience of the week was going home for lunch rather than eating at work. If I look at this sentence, I see that I have two ideas. One before the comma and one after. I need to look at each idea and decide if the ideas are independent clauses or dependent clauses. This first sentence, my worst experience of the week was going home for lunch, is an independent clause. The second idea is actually a phrase. Rather than eating at work only has a verb, eating. I don't know who would rather be eating at work, so I actually have a phrase here. Because I have an independent clause followed by a phrase, I don't need to make any changes to this sentence. It's correct. The next sentence, my children didn't know I was coming. They had used most of the bread, has two ideas. The first idea, my children didn't know I was coming, is an independent clause. It can be a sentence by itself. The second idea is also an independent clause. If I have an independent clause with a comma after it, followed by another independent clause, I have a comma splice sentence that I need to fix. If I look at the sentence and try and decide how I can fix it, I have a few different options. For this sentence, I'm going to use a comma and a fanboy. I already have my comma between my two independent clauses, so I just need to add a fanboy. The one that makes the most sense in this situation would be so. So I'm going to add in so after the comma, and now I have a complete sentence. If I look at the next sentence, even though I have a comma here, I realize that I only have one idea. All I had to make a sandwich were two thin crumpled pieces of crust. That's really just one idea. The comma here is dividing up two adjectives instead of two ideas. So this whole idea is an independent clause, which I do not need to change. This sentence is correct. The next word group reads, I sat there eating my tattered sandwich and trying to relax. Then the telephone rang. I have two ideas here. My first idea ends at relax, and if I look at that idea, I see I have an independent clause here. If I look at my second idea, then the telephone rang. This one I need to look at a little more carefully. I have a verb, rang, and if I ask myself what rang, it's the telephone. If I look at that whole idea, then the telephone rang, even though it's short, it is an independent clause. It's a complete thought. So I have an independent clause, comma, independent clause, which gives me a comma splice. So I have to fix this sentence. Because I have then here, really the best solution would be to go ahead and break this into two sentences. So I'm going to change that comma at the end of the first independent clause to a period, and then make a capital T at the beginning of then. So now I have two separate independent clause sentences. If I look at my next sentence, I see I have a few different ideas. It was for my daughter who was in the bathroom. She called down to me that I should get the person's name and number. I have three different ideas here. If I look at the first idea, it was for my daughter, I have an independent clause because the it here is acting as the subject. If I look at the next idea, who was in the bathroom, I see that that is a dependent clause. It begins with the dependent word who, and then is followed by the verb. The last idea, she called down to me that I should get the person's name and number, is an independent clause. If I look at this sentence, I see I have an independent clause, a dependent clause, and an independent clause. In most cases, this would actually give you a correct sentence. But if I really look carefully at this sentence, I see even though I have three ideas, really I have just two main ideas. That the phone was for my daughter, and she told me to take the message. The who is in the bathroom is really acting as an extra detail about the daughter. So really, I have an independent clause followed by an independent clause. So I have a comma splice here that I need to fix. And again, I'm going to use dividing the two independent clauses into two separate sentences. This fits best in this situation because I have so much going on in this sentence. Next, I have, as soon as I sat down again, someone knocked on the door. It was a neatly dressed couple with bright eyes who wanted to talk to me about a higher power in life. I see I have three different ideas here. My first idea begins with as, and if I look at this idea, I see that I have a dependent clause. We begin with a dependent word, and we have a subject and verb. If I look at the next idea, someone knocked on the door, I see that I have an independent clause. That could be a sentence by itself. The last idea is also an independent clause. Since I have an independent clause, comma, independent clause, I have a comma splice. It doesn't matter that I begin with a dependent clause because what I mostly want to look at is where my two independent clauses come together, and they come together at this comma. So I need to go ahead and fix this. Since I already somehow have a capital letter here, I'm going to just change this comma to a period. My next sentence, I politely got rid of them and went back to finish my lunch, is just one idea. And I know that's an independent clause. And because I have an independent clause alone, this is correct. The next sentence reads, I thought I would relax over my coffee. I had to break up a fight between my two young sons about which television channel to watch. Here I have two ideas. The first one ends at coffee and is an independent clause. The second idea runs the rest of the sentence, and it's also an independent clause. Since I have independent clause, comma, independent clause, I have a comma splice, and I need to combine my two sentences here somehow. Since I already have a comma, I'm going to just go ahead and add a fanboy after that comma, and but fits the best here. Now I have a correct sentence. The last sentence reads, as a last bit of frustration, my daughter came downstairs and asked me to drive her over to a friend's house before I went back to work. Here I have two ideas, divided by a comma. The first idea is a dependent clause. Begins with a dependent word. I'm sorry, this is actually a phrase. Even though it begins with a dependent word, I only have a subject, the bit of frustration. I don't have a verb. The second part of the sentence is the other idea. That's an independent clause. Since I have a phrase followed by an independent clause, I can't possibly have a run-on sentence. Remember, a run-on sentence has two independent clauses put together in an incorrect way. So here I have a correct sentence that I don't need to change. Now you've gotten a good review on run-on sentences within a paragraph and how to fix them. And you also have your first opportunity to earn a homework pass. Go ahead and send me an email at the email address listed here and tell me what you plan to do this weekend. Once I get your email, I'll go ahead and issue you a homework pass, which you'll get in class on Monday.